Marcus only thought he was helping her. The dress had caught under the wheelchair brake, and across the room his son was clawing at his own throat, lips, darkening chest, caving in with each failed breath. Riley grabbed his wrist with both hands, her voice cracking. "Please don't lift my dress." But he had already pulled the fabric. Underneath where skin should have been, there was cold, metal, and carbon fiber. Not a scar, not a wound. A prosthetic leg bolted and strapped from the knee down. She was not ashamed. She was terrified. And Marcus understood nothing yet. 6 weeks before that night, Marcus Thompson had not slept more than 4 hours straight in over a year. His wife Laura had died in a car accident 22 months earlier. And since then, the world had shrunk to the size of a small house in the suburbs of Richmond, Virginia. Him, his 7-year-old son Caleb, and an inhaler that was never more than arm's reach away. Caleb had severe asthma. The kind that didn't just wheeze. The kind that shut airways down without warning. That turned a normal Tuesday afternoon into a race against suffocation. Marcus had learned to sleep with one ear open to keep the nebulizer charged to never let the medication run out. But the body has limits, and Marcus had passed his a long time ago. He worked as a building inspector for the county, a job that required him to be on site, walking through half-finished structures, climbing ladders, filing reports that could not be done remotely. Every morning, he dropped Caleb off at school with a typed instruction sheet for the nurse. Every afternoon, he picked him up with his heart in his throat, scanning the boy's face for signs of tightness, for the slight pull of skin between his ribs that meant trouble. He had tried 3 different babysitters in the past year. The first quit after 1 emergency room visit. The second couldn't handle the medication schedule. The third simply stopped showing up. Marcus couldn't blame any of them. Caring for Caleb required more than patience. It required a kind of calm that most people didn't have when a child's lips started turning blue. The agency sent Riley Bennett on a Wednesday. Marcus almost turned her away at the door. She was thin, early 30s, wearing a long cotton dress that reached her ankles despite the August heat. Her resume was sparse, 2 references, both from out of state, no local history. She spoke in short, precise sentences, made direct eye contact only when necessary, and carried a canvas bag that she held close to her body like it contained something fragile. She didn't smile. She didn't try to make small talk when Marcus led her through the house and showed her Caleb's room. The nebulizer on the nightstand, the oxygen monitor clipped to the headboard, the emergency action plan taped to the wall. She studied each item with a focus that felt almost clinical. Dated. Most applicants looked overwhelmed. Riley looked like she was taking inventory. "Has he been hospitalized in the last 6 months?" Riley asked, her eyes still on the action plan. Marcus told her twice. Once in January, once in March. She nodded. "And you keep epinephrine in the house?" Marcus frowned. None of the previous candidates had asked about epinephrine. He told her there was an EpiPen in the kitchen drawer prescribed as a precaution for a possible allergic trigger. Riley said nothing else. She set her bag down beside the couch, folded her hands in her lap, and waited. That was the first thing Marcus noticed about her. She never sat all the way back in a chair. She perched at the edge, weight forward, as if she might need to stand at any second. Caleb took to her faster than Marcus expected. The boy was shy around strangers, especially since Laura's death. But Riley had a way of entering his space without crowding it. She didn't crouch down to his level or use a sing-song voice. She simply sat nearby and let him come to her. By the end of the first afternoon, Caleb had shown her his collection of plastic dinosaurs, and Riley had correctly named every species, including the ones Marcus always got wrong. That night, for the first time in months, Marcus ate dinner without checking the baby monitor every 2 minutes. He told himself it was a good sign. He told himself to stop looking for problems. But something about Riley didn't sit right. The long dress in summer, the way she never turned her back to a window, the fact that when her phone buzzed once during the afternoon, she looked at the screen and her entire body went rigid. Then, she silenced it and slipped it into her bag without a word. It happened on Riley's second day. Marcus was in the kitchen making lunch when he heard Caleb coughing in the living room. It started light, the dry, scratchy kind that usually passed on its own. He reached for a glass of water, But by the time he turned around, the cough had deepened into something hollow, and then it stopped. Not a gradual trailing off, a hard stop, like a door slamming shut. Marcus dropped the glass and ran. Caleb was on the floor, one hand on his throat, his mouth open, his chest pulling inward with each failed breath. His lips were already changing color. Not blue yet, but heading there. Marcus grabbed the inhaler from the shelf and knelt beside him. But his hands were shaking, and Caleb was thrashing, and the cap wouldn't come off. Then Riley was there. She moved past Marcus without a word, and everything she did was fast but deliberate. She took the inhaler from his hands, removed the cap in one motion, attached the spacer that Marcus always forgot to use, tilted Caleb's head back at a precise angle, and delivered 2 puffs with a rhythm that suggested she had done this hundreds of times. When the inhaler didn't take effect within 30 seconds, she reached into her canvas bag and pulled out a portable pulse oximeter, her own, not the one from Caleb's room. She clipped it to the boy's finger, read the number, and told Marcus in a flat, steady voice, "His oxygen is at 89. We need the nebulizer now. Plug it in and bring it here. Don't carry him. Keep him upright where he is." Marcus obeyed, not because he trusted her, because her voice left no space for hesitation. By the time the nebulizer mask was over Caleb's face, the boy's breathing had started to loosen. Color returned to his lips, his eyes wide with panic, slowly softened. Riley kept 2 fingers on his wrist, counting silently, watching the oximeter until the number climbed past 93. Only then did she lean back. Only then did her hands begin to shake, barely visible quickly, hidden by pressing her palms flat against her thighs. Marcus stared at her. The whole episode had lasted less than 4 minutes, but it had felt like an hour. He had seen paramedics work slower than that. He had seen emergency room nurses hesitate more. Riley was not a nurse. At least nothing on her resume said she was. She had listed her previous experience as domestic work, cooking, light housekeeping. Nothing medical. Nothing that explained how she carried her own pulse oximeter in her bag, or how she knew the exact tilt of a child's head for optimal airway opening during an acute asthma episode. "Where did you learn to do that?" Marcus asked, still kneeling on the floor beside his son. Riley was already packing the oximeter back into her bag. She didn't look at him when she answered. "I've been around sick children before." That was all she offered. No elaboration, no personal history, no reassuring smile. Marcus wanted to press, but Caleb was reaching for his hand, and the boy's fingers were still cold. And in that moment, having answers mattered, less than having someone who could keep his son breathing. So, he let it go. That night, after Caleb fell asleep, Marcus sat on the back porch and replayed everything in his head. The oximeter, the spacer technique, the way she read the number and knew instantly what it meant. Housekeepers didn't know these things, but people who had lived through them did. Marcus opened his laptop and searched Riley Bennett's name. He found almost nothing: a disconnected phone number in another state, a mailing address that led to a P.O. box. No social media. No photos. It was as if the woman in his house had materialized from nowhere. Over the next 2 weeks, Riley became indispensable. She kept the house clean, prepared meals that Caleb actually ate, and managed his medication schedule with a precision that made Marcus feel like he had been fumbling through it alone for years. She knew which foods could trigger histamine responses in asthmatic children. She adjusted the humidity in Caleb's room, using a damp towel over the vent when the air got too dry. She woke before Marcus every morning and had Caleb's breakfast ready by the time the boy came downstairs. But the more competent she proved, the more Marcus noticed the things she refused to do. She never changed clothes in the house. She arrived in a long dress and left in the same one. She never rolled up her sleeves, even when washing dishes. She used the bathroom only when Marcus and Caleb were in another room, and she locked the door. He could hear the click from down the hall. When Caleb once bumped into her leg by accident, she flinched so hard that the boy looked up at her with confusion and asked if he had heard her. The pharmacy was a 15-minute drive from the house, and Marcus went every 2 weeks to refill Caleb's prescriptions. On a Thursday afternoon, he walked in and found Riley already at the counter. She didn't see him. He was in the next aisle, close enough to hear the pharmacist say, "Same name as last time." Riley nodded quickly and gave a name Marcus had never heard: Sarah Jennings. The pharmacist typed it in and handed her a small paper bag. Marcus stepped back before she could turn around. He watched her leave through the front entrance, walking quickly, the bag pressed against her chest. That evening, while Riley was reading to Caleb upstairs, Marcus found the paper bag in her canvas tote by the couch. She had forgotten to take it with her. The label on the bottle was facing up: insulin, pediatric dosage, prescribed to a minor dependent, under the name Jennings. Marcus felt the floor shift. Riley had no children. She had never mentioned a child, and pediatric insulin meant a specific patient, a child who needed it to live. That evening, after Caleb was asleep, Marcus confronted her. He did it quietly, standing in the kitchen while she wiped down the counter. He told her what he had seen: the pharmacy, the name, the insulin. Riley's hand stopped moving. The sponge stayed pressed flat against the granite. She didn't deny it. She didn't try to explain it away. She stood there for a long time, and when she finally spoke, her voice was stripped of every defense she had built around herself. "My daughter was diabetic," Riley said. "Type 1. She was 5. Marcus waited. Riley's jaw tightened. "She's gone. She died 2 years ago." The kitchen light buzzed overhead. Marcus could hear the refrigerator humming. He asked the obvious question why she was still buying insulin for a child who was no longer alive. Riley looked at him then, and her eyes were dry. But something behind them had cracked open. "Because the day I stopped filling that prescription is the day I admit she's never coming back. And I can't do that yet." Marcus stood in that kitchen and felt the ground dissolve beneath the simple categories he had built: safe and unsafe, trustworthy and suspicious. This woman had saved his son's life with skills that came from somewhere she wouldn't name. She was buying medicine for a ghost. She was living under a name that wasn't hers. Every rational instinct told him to let her go to protect Caleb from whatever storm was circling this woman. But Caleb was breathing tonight because of her. Caleb had laughed today for the first time in weeks because of her. Marcus looked at Riley, who was gripping the edge of the counter, as if waiting for the sentence she had already written for herself. And he made a choice that he couldn't fully explain, one that came from the same place that had kept him going after Laura died: the stubborn, irrational belief that broken people could still be trusted with the things that mattered most. "You can stay," he said. Riley closed her eyes. She nodded once, and neither of them said another word that night. After that night in the kitchen, something shifted between them. Not closer, but quieter. Marcus stopped asking questions. Riley stopped flinching every time he walked into the room. A fragile, unspoken truce settled over the house like dust on a shelf. And for a few weeks, it almost felt like stability. But Riley's behavior didn't improve. It calcified. She was excellent with Caleb, attentive, precise, emotionally steady in ways that Marcus could not always manage, but she never let herself soften past a certain line. She read to Caleb at bedtime, but always left the room before he fell asleep. She helped him with homework, but kept her chair at the far end of the table. When the boy reached for her hand during a walk to the park, she let him hold it for 3 seconds, then gently pulled away and pointed at something in the distance to distract him. Marcus watched all of this from the edges. He saw the way Riley's eyes tracked every car that drove slowly past the house. He saw how she checked the locks on the back door twice before sitting down for dinner, and how she kept her phone face down at all times, the ringer permanently off. One night, he woke up at 2:00 the morning and found her sitting in the dark living room, still dressed, her bag on her lap, as if she were waiting for a cab that might arrive at any second. He asked if she was okay. She told him she couldn't sleep, and he didn't push. But the image stayed: a woman fully dressed in the middle of the night, ready to disappear. The hardest part was Caleb. The boy was attaching to Riley in a way that Marcus hadn't seen since Laura. He drew pictures for her. He asked her to stay for dinner. One morning, Marcus overheard Caleb telling a classmate on the phone that Riley knows everything about dinosaurs, and she can make my breathing machine work, even when it gets stuck. The pride in his voice was unmistakable, and it terrified Marcus because he could see what was coming. Caleb was building something on a foundation that Riley kept trying to pull away from. Every time the boy moved closer, Riley receded. Not out of cruelty. Marcus could see that. Out of something more painful than cruelty. Out of the practiced certainty that anyone she loved would eventually be taken from her. There was one afternoon that Marcus could not shake. He had come home early and found Riley on the back porch holding her phone. She wasn't talking. She was staring at the screen with an expression he had only seen once before on his own face, the night the hospital called about Laura. Then her phone buzzed. A text, or maybe a notification. Riley read it, and her hands began to tremble. She deleted it, powered the phone off completely, and sat there with her eyes closed, breathing in a pattern that looked practiced 4 counts and 7 counts out. When she opened her eyes and saw Marcus in the doorway, she stood up immediately and said she had been checking the weather. Marcus nodded. He didn't believe her, but he had made a promise in the kitchen, the unspoken kind, and he intended to keep it even as the weight of what he didn't know pressed harder against the walls of his house. It happened on a Sunday evening, 6 weeks after Riley first arrived. Caleb had been fine all day, running in the yard, laughing, eating well. But asthma doesn't negotiate with good days. Marcus was in the garage, putting away tools, when he heard the sound. Not coughing. A high-pitched wheeze, followed by a wet, strangled gasp, the kind that meant Caleb's throat was closing faster than his body could fight it. Marcus ran inside. Caleb was on the living room floor, his face dark red, his fingers clawing at the carpet. Riley was already on her knees beside him, the nebulizer mask in her hands. But something was wrong. Her dress had caught in the hinge of the wheelchair that Marcus kept folded near the couch, a leftover from when Laura's mother had visited months ago. Riley was pinned at an awkward angle, half kneeling, unable to reach Caleb's face with the mask because the fabric pulled her backward every time she leaned forward. Marcus dropped beside her and grabbed the hem of the Clear's throat dress to yank it free. Riley's reaction was instant and violent. She seized his wrist with one hand, her grip so tight it left marks, and her voice came out as a raw, breaking whisper. "Please don't lift my dress." Caleb was gasping. The oximeter on his finger read 86 and dropping. There was no room for dignity, no room for secrets, no room for anything except the next 3 seconds. Marcus pulled the fabric. The dress tore at the seam where it had snagged, and the fabric fell away from Riley's left leg from the knee down. There was no skin, no muscle, no human limb. From just below the kneecap, her leg was a construction of titanium alloy and carbon fiber, a prosthetic, sleek and mechanical, bolted to a socket that wrapped around what remained of her knee. The connection point was raw and red, where the socket met flesh, the skin around it scarred and puckered in a way that suggested not a medical amputation, but something violent, something torn. Marcus stared. He couldn't help it. His brain split in two. One half processing the emergency with Caleb, the other half trying to reconcile the woman he'd been living with for 6 weeks with the hardware attached to her body. Riley didn't wait for him to recover. She twisted free from the torn dress, crawled forward on her hands and her one real knee, and pressed the nebulizer mask over Caleb's nose and mouth. Her prosthetic leg dragged behind her, the metal scraping against the hardwood floor. She held the mask steady with both hands and counted the boy's breaths out loud until the wheezing softened, until the oximeter crept back above 90, until Caleb's eyes fluttered closed with exhaustion. Only then did Riley sit back. Her torn dress hung around her like a ruined curtain, the prosthetic fully exposed. She didn't try to cover it. She didn't explain. She sat on the floor with her back against the couch, one real leg folded beneath her, one metal leg extended straight, and she stared at the wall, as if she had just lost the last thing she had been holding on to. Marcus sat across from her. Caleb was breathing between them, asleep on the carpet. The room smelled like albuterol and sweat. Marcus looked at the prosthetic, at the scars, at the way the metal connected to damaged skin, at the clear evidence that whatever had taken her leg had not been clean or surgical. This was not a car accident. This was not a birth defect. The tissue around the socket was jagged and uneven, the kind of wound that came from force, from impact, from something done to her rather than something that simply happened. "Riley," Marcus said. She didn't move. He said her name again, softer. She turned her head and looked at him. And for the first time since he had known her, she looked like someone who had stopped running, not because she wanted to, but because she had nowhere left to go. "Who did this to you?" Marcus asked. Riley looked down at the metal where her leg used to be. Her answer was barely a whisper. "The same person who killed my daughter." Marcus didn't sleep that night. He sat in the kitchen after Riley retreated to the guest room, turning her last words over in his mind like a stone he couldn't put down. That sentence changed everything. The insulin at the pharmacy, the fake name, the long dresses, the flinching, the way she sat at the edge of every chair. None of it was paranoia. It was survival. Riley was not running from grief. She was running from someone specific, someone who had taken her child and her leg, and was apparently still close enough to keep her afraid. 2 days later, they came. Marcus was bringing groceries in from the car when a dark sedan pulled up across the street. 2 men stepped out. Both wore plain clothes, but their posture was unmistakable. The squared shoulders, the deliberate scanning of the house, the way one of them rested his hand near his hip out of habit. The taller one approached Marcus at the front door and introduced himself as Detective Garrett, flashing a badge so quickly that Marcus couldn't read the department name. He said they were looking for a woman who might be using the name Riley Bennett or possibly Sarah Jennings. He described her accurately: height, build, the long dresses. Then he added in a tone that was calibrated to sound casual but wasn't. "She may be connected to a serious criminal matter. Harboring her could put you and your family at risk." Marcus kept his face neutral. He told them he had employed a housekeeper through an agency, but that she had quit after a week. Detective Garrett studied him for a long moment, then handed over a business card and said to call if she turned up. The second man never spoke. He just stood by the sedan watching the windows of the house. After they left, Marcus went inside and found Riley standing in the hallway. She had heard everything. Her face was white. Her hands were pressed flat against the wall behind her, as if she were bracing for an impact. "They found me," she said, and her voice had no emotion left in it, just a flat statement of fact, like reading a weather report about a hurricane that had already made landfall. That night, Riley packed her canvas bag. She waited until Caleb was asleep, and then she came to Marcus in the kitchen and told him she was leaving. She said she had put them both in danger by staying too long, and that the men who came to the house would not stop. Marcus asked who they really were. Riley told him they were not real detectives. Her ex-husband, Derek Walsh, was a police officer, a lieutenant, and the men who visited were part of his circle. She said Derek had connections inside 3 different departments, and that the badge they'd flashed could have come from any of them. Marcus asked what Derek wanted. Riley's answer was simple and final. "Me silenced permanently." She wouldn't say more. She thanked Marcus for keeping her secret, for letting her stay, for giving her 6 weeks of something she called almost normal. Then she walked to Caleb's room, stood in the doorway for a long time without entering, and left through the back door. Caleb woke up the next morning and asked where Riley was. Marcus told him she had to go away for a while. The boy didn't cry. He just stopped talking. He stopped eating breakfast. By the afternoon, his breathing had tightened, and by evening, Marcus was in the emergency room again, holding the nebulizer mask over his son's face while Caleb stared at the ceiling with flat, empty eyes. The doctor told Marcus that stress was a significant trigger for asthma in children, and that sudden emotional loss could provoke a prolonged episode. Marcus already knew this. He knew it the way he knew that Laura's death had tripled Caleb's hospitalizations. The way he knew that the boy's lungs were wired to his heart in ways that medicine could not fully explain. Riley's absence was not just an emotional void. It was a medical crisis. Riley came back 4 days later, not through the front door. Marcus found her sitting on the back porch at dawn, her canvas bag beside her, her prosthetic leg visible beneath a shorter dress, as if she had stopped caring about hiding it, or as if she no longer had the energy. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. Her skin was gray. There was a bruise on her left forearm that hadn't been there when she left. Marcus opened the screen door and sat down beside her without speaking. He waited. Riley stared at the yard at the swing set he had put up for Caleb last summer. And then she told him everything. Her real name was Riley Bennett. That part had been true. She had married Derek Walsh at 24. He was a lieutenant with the county police, respected, connected, untouchable. The abuse started in the second year of their marriage after their daughter Emma was born. It was controlled at first. A shove, a grabbed arm, words, designed to make Riley believe she deserved it. Then, it escalated. Derek broke her wrist once and drove her to a hospital 2 counties away where no one would recognize them. He told the intake nurse she had fallen down the stairs. Riley didn't correct him. She was too afraid, and Derek had made it clear that his badge meant more than her word ever would. When Emma was 4, Riley tried to leave. She packed a bag while Derek was on shift and drove to her sister's house 3 states away. Derek found her within 48 hours. He used department resources to track her phone, her credit card, her sister's address. He brought 2 officers with him, friends, men who owed him favors. They stood in the living room while Derek carried Emma out to the car. Riley's sister called the local police, but when they arrived, Derek showed his badge and told them it was a custody matter. They left without filing a report. After that, things got worse. Derek controlled everything: the money, the car, the phone. Riley lived in a house that had become a prison with a police lock. Emma's diabetes required regular medical attention, and Derek used it as leverage. If Riley behaved, Emma got her insulin on time. If she didn't, there were delays, missed appointments, skipped doses. It was a cruelty so calculated that it didn't leave bruises, only blood sugar numbers that kept climbing. Emma died 3 days after her 5th birthday, a diabetic crisis that spiraled into organ failure because Derek had hidden her insulin supply during one of his punishments. The official report listed it as a complication of type 1 diabetes. No investigation was opened. Derek attended the funeral in his dress uniform. Riley's leg was the final act. 6 months after Emma's death, she tried to run again. Dirk caught her on a back road outside of town. What happened next? She described in 3 short sentences, each one delivered without inflection. He ran her off the road. The car rolled, and when she woke up in the hospital, her left leg was gone below the knee. The accident report said she had swerved to avoid a deer. Riley knew better. Derek visited her in the hospital and told her that if she ever spoke about any of it, he would make sure no one believed her, and that next time she wouldn't wake up at all. She disappeared after the hospital. New name, new city, cash, work only. The insulin she still bought for Emma was the one thread she couldn't cut. The prosthetic was a constant reminder, not of what she had lost, but of what he was capable of. And now, because she had stayed too long in one place, because she had allowed herself to care about a man and his son, Derek's people had found her again. Riley told Marcus that the 2 men who came to his door were not just looking for her. They were preparing the ground. Derek wanted to bring her back or silence her, or both, and anyone near her when it happened would be considered a loose end. Marcus listened to all of it. When Riley finished, the sun was fully up and Caleb's bedroom light had just turned on upstairs. Marcus could hear the boy's footsteps, the small shuffling walk of a child who had been sick and was only now getting steady again. He looked at Riley, at the bruise on her arm, the prosthetic. She no longer hid the hollowed-out eyes of a woman who had survived everything except the belief that survival was worth it. "You're not leaving again," Marcus said. Riley shook her head. "You don't understand. They're already watching this house." Marcus looked across the yard, past the swing set to the street beyond the fence. A dark sedan was parked on the corner. It had been there since yesterday. "I know," Marcus said. "That's why you're staying." The sedan didn't move for 2 days. It sat on the corner like a held-breath engine, off windows tinted, always occupied. Marcus kept the curtains drawn and the doors locked. He called in sick to work. He kept Caleb home from school. Told the boy it was a special vacation week. Caleb didn't believe him. 7-year-olds can fear the way animals smell weather. But he didn't argue. He stayed close to Riley, drawing at the kitchen table while she prepared meals with a calm that Marcus recognized as rehearsed. She had lived under siege before. She knew how to move through a house that was being watched without letting the terror reach the surface. On the 3rd night, the situation escalated. Marcus was checking the back door when he saw headlights pull into the alley behind the house. A second car. He moved to the front window and confirmed the sedan was still on the corner. 2 vehicles, at least 4 men. Riley was in Caleb's room reading to him. Marcus walked in and kept his voice level. He told her they needed to talk. She looked at his face and understood immediately. She finished the page she was reading, tucked the blanket around Caleb's shoulders, and followed Marcus to the kitchen. He told her about the second car. Riley closed her eyes. When she opened them, there was something different in her expression. Not fear anymore, but the exhausted clarity of someone who has finally run out of road. "They're going to come in," she said. "Tonight or tomorrow." Derek doesn't wait once he's set up. Marcus had spent the last 2 days thinking about what to do, and every option led to a wall. He couldn't call the police. Derek was the police, and his reach extended into departments Marcus couldn't identify. He couldn't run. Caleb's condition made travel dangerous, and they would be found within hours. He couldn't fight. He was one man, with no weapon against a group of trained officers operating outside the law. But Marcus had something Derek didn't account for. He had a phone with a camera, a social media account he barely used, and the one thing that corrupt men feared more than confrontation witnesses, thousands of them, all at once. He told Riley the plan. She shook her head before he finished. "If you go live, they'll know I talked. Derek will deny everything. He'll say I'm delusional, that I lost my leg in a drunk driving accident, that our daughter died of natural causes. He has paperwork for all of it." Marcus looked at her. "Does he have paperwork for the 2 cars outside my house right now?" Riley didn't answer. Marcus pulled out his phone. "I'm not asking you to testify in court. I'm asking you to sit next to me while I show the world what's happening in real time. Let them watch. Let them see the cars, the men, the badges. Let Derek explain that to a live audience." Riley stared at him for a long time. Then she looked down the hallway toward Caleb's room, where the boy was sleeping with the nebulizer humming beside his bed. She nodded once. Marcus set up the phone on the kitchen counter at 11:47 that night, angled toward the front window where the sedan's headlights were visible through the curtain gap. He went live. Within the first minute, he had 12 viewers. Within 5 minutes, over 300. He spoke calmly, directly, without dramatics. He gave his name, his address, and said that his home was being surveilled by men connected to a corrupt police lieutenant named Derek Walsh. He described the 2 vehicles, their positions, their arrival times. Then he turned the camera toward Riley. She sat at the kitchen table, her prosthetic leg visible beneath the hem of her dress. She didn't speak at first. She just let the camera see what Derek had done. When she finally talked, her voice was flat and steady, the voice of someone who had stopped protecting the man who destroyed her life. She gave dates, names, incident reports that were never filed, hospital visits with falsified records. She described how Emma died. She described the night she lost her leg. She spoke for 11 minutes without stopping, and by the time she finished, the viewer count had passed 8,000. The sedan's engine started at 12:14. Marcus heard it through the window, and the chat on his live stream exploded with messages. Someone had already tagged the local FBI field office. Someone else had called the Richmond news desk. The second car in the alley turned its headlights on. Riley gripped the edge of the table. Marcus kept the camera steady. He could feel his heart slamming against his ribs, but his hands didn't shake. Not tonight. Tonight's shaking was not an option. The front porch light flickered as a shadow moved across it. Someone was at the door. The knock never came. Instead, there were sirens, faint at first, then building from multiple directions. Red and blue lights sweeping across the living room, sealing through the curtain gaps. The FBI arrived at 12:29:17 minutes, after the first viewer tagged their Richmond field office. 11 minutes after a supervising agent opened the live stream on her personal phone and recognized Derek Walsh's name from an internal investigation that had been stalled for over a year. They came in 4 vehicles. They came with federal jurisdiction. And they came with enough evidence compiled from Riley's one-minute testimony and cross-referenced against files. They already had to issue an immediate arrest warrant. The men in the sedan did not resist. There were 2 off-duty officers from Derek's department, operating on unofficial orders. carrying service weapons they had no authorization to use outside their jurisdiction. The men in the alley car were gone by the time agents reached the back of the house, but their license plates were captured on the live stream, and they were arrested at a gas station 40 miles south before sunrise. Derek Walsh himself was taken into custody at his home at 6:15 the next morning. The arresting agents found 3 phones, a laptop with encrypted files linking him to evidence tampering in 4 separate cases, and a folder containing Riley's medical records, forged discharge papers, and a falsified accident report from the night he ran her off the road. Marcus turned off the live stream at 12:51 after an FBI agent knocked on his door with credentials he could actually verify and told him the perimeter was secure. The broadcast had reached over 40,000 viewers. By morning, it was being covered by every major news outlet in Virginia. Riley sat on the couch with a blanket around her shoulders, answering questions from a female agent who treated her with a quiet professionalism that made Riley cry for the first time since Marcus had known her, not from sadness, but from the shock of being believed. Caleb slept through all of it. When he woke up the next morning and found the house full of strangers, Riley took his hand and led him to the kitchen and made him breakfast as if nothing had happened. The boy ate every bite. 1 year later, the house on the corner of Maple and 9th looked the same from the outside. The swing set still stood in the backyard. The nebulizer still sat on Caleb's nightstand, though it was used less often now. Caleb's asthma had not disappeared, but his episodes had dropped from twice a month to once every 3 months, and the doctors attributed the improvement to reduced stress, stable routine, and the presence of a consistent caregiver who understood his condition better than most medical professionals. Riley no longer wore long dresses. On most days, she wore jeans or shorts. The prosthetic, visible, and unremarkable. Just another part of her body that Caleb had long stopped noticing. Derek Walsh was convicted on 11 federal charges, including evidence tampering, abuse of power, involuntary manslaughter in the death of Emma Walsh, and conspiracy to intimidate a witness. He received a sentence of 32 years without parole. The officers, who had participated in his network, were tried separately. The internal investigation that had been stalled for a year was completed in 3 months after the live stream forced the department's hand. Marcus proposed on a Saturday morning in October in the kitchen where Riley had first told him about Emma, where she had packed her bag and tried to leave, where they had sat together and broadcast the truth to a screen full of strangers. He didn't get down on one knee. He just set the ring on the counter between them while she was pouring coffee and said, "I'm not asking you to forget anything. I'm asking you to stay." Riley picked up the ring and held it in her palm for a long time. Then she put it on. Caleb walked in 2 minutes later, saw the ring, and asked if this meant Riley was his mom now. Riley looked at Marcus. Marcus looked at his son. "If she wants to be," Marcus said. Riley knelt down her prosthetic, clicking softly against the tile floor, and pulled Caleb into her arms. "I already am," she said. Family is not built by blood. It is built by the people who choose to stay when staying is the hardest thing to do. It is built by a man who opened his door to a stranger and refused to close it when the truth turned out to be more complicated than he expected. It is built by a woman who lost everything and still had enough left in her to save a little boy she didn't know anything to. And it is built by a child who understood in the simple and unshakable way that children understand that the woman who made his breathing machine work and knew every dinosaur by name was exactly where she was supposed to.